If you were to turn your computer on today and get on the ubiquitous internet and just type in the words Heart's Delight, what do you think would happen? About 350,000 websites about kinds of ice cream and products and places all over the world. But if you were to connect it with Mr. Miner and zero in on Chazy, you would come to this beautiful Heart's Delight farm where we're located today. And why are we here? Well, Calvin and I are pretty much free spirits. We can go wherever we want to. But besides that, we're celebrating a centennial.
Exactly.
Linda Masters, how are you?
I'm fine.
Steve
How are you,
Facette,
Grady?
how are you?
Very good, thank you.
These two, I don't mind telling you, are entering into this enterprise with no small amount of trepidation. They have no idea what we might spring on them. And I always tell people ahead of time, don't sweat it. I'm not smart enough to ask hard questions.
Oh, that's good.
But I am thrilled to be here. And I have to tell you, even before we get into your part of it, that this place has always had a connection with me and my huge family. When I first came here, well, let's say more than 4 decades ago, and my little kids, who were then little kids, heard that there were bison on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They used to beg me on a Sunday afternoon to take whatever old rattletrap car we drove in those years and come up here so they could see the buffalo.
Exactly. We used to have quite a number of people that used to visit the farm, and that's exactly what they were looking for.
But I have to tell you, I've never been this close. I never dared to drive up
Really?
this driveway. I thought maybe the Heart's Delight police would come and send me away. Calvin said it's okay. If you go in the barn, you have to wear boots, but...
Yes, you do. And that's biosecurity. That's just for the safety of our cattle nowadays, so we don't have anything happening to them, disease-wise.
But this is a very special place. In our country, anything that's 100 years old is special.
That's true.
That's right.
But some great things happened 100 years ago and more, right in this neck of the woods. Linda, what's your connection with...
Actually, I'm librarian here at the Institute. I've been here since 1975.
Great. And you, Steve?
And I'm the director of physical plant, and I've been here for 21 years now. I've worked on the maintenance staff for most of the time that I've been here, and so I know the place inside and out pretty well by now.
These folks, the miners, were legends in their own time. And now that time has passed, they're veritable North Country icons. They're well known almost everywhere in the United States because of, he was a great industrialist and
Yes.
certainly a philanthropist, and all the things they donated money to. It just happened last year was the silver anniversary of Physicians Hospital, CVPH,
Mm-hmm.
of which they had a major role, as you know, and we did, I don't know how many programs on that history. But now we're here. And we're talking about a guy who wasn't even born in the North Country.
No, he wasn't. He actually was born in Wisconsin, in Juneau, Wisconsin, but his father had been born here in Chazy. And it was by the time he was about 10 years old that he was orphaned. Both of his parents had died,
Yes.
and he was sent back
One
to
died,
live.
and it wasn't very many years later that the other one died. when he was
Exactly.
10.
Right.
And then he was brought back here to live on his grandfather's homestead, and he lived with his Uncle John and his Aunt Hulda here on the farm till he was about 18
Right.
years of age.
They turned him into a pretty darn good farmer, as I've read.
I think he worked fairly hard, and he really learned the value of doing chores and earning an honest living.
It's the
And
North Country air,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely.
Well, he learned to love farming, I think, in his early days. And a lot of people don't realize that. And obviously his love for farming brought him back to his roots after he went out and was educated and stuff. So.
And that farm was only a little tiny portion of what the Miner farm is today.
yes, it was. It was 144 acres and had not increased since 1820 when his grandfather bought the farm until he arrived back here in 1903. Then things changed.
Yes.
Considerably.
Considerably is
And what
correct.
and back in those days, as we know, communications wasn't nearly what it is today. We've already talked about the internet. How a person could be that successful and do that many things in a short life is a real tribute to the kind of person he was, and Alice too, when you
Right.
stop to think about
Right.
it, you know.
Right.
The wonderful Alice T. Minor Museum in Chazy is a favorite spot of
Yes.
ours.
Yes.
We feel special when we walk in the door there. We just love a lot of things connected with the miners.
Well, there are a lot of things in that museum that are really unique,
Oh, yes.
and it's just a pleasure to go visit.
We send people there because how many people do you know who've lived here all their lives and who've never darkened the door?
That happens
right.
everywhere, isn't it? That's what always
Everywhere.
happens.
The local people do miss out on what's underneath. their-
Despite your face, your
That's
nose,
right.
you know the
That's
old
right.
saying?
That's
people,
right.
right.
How many old timers, 70, 80, 90 years old, have never walked through a sable chasm?
That's right.
True.
That's right.
You know, check your own backyard. And when people view this
Well, I hope we.
program through the eyes of Calvin's very special Calvinism, as people call it, hometown cable,
Yes.
Calvin vision, maybe that'll whet their appetites. We're going to see some interesting things today. I didn't realize you had a nice little museum here.
Well, actually, yesterday was the opening for the public, so that was
Oh, it
the
was.
first day that the public was able to view what we have here. And we had quite a number of visitors, and earlier this
Right.
morning we had quite a number too, so I guess they're at lunch.
You know, no small effort
No.
has been undertaken to prepare for
No.
this year, have it?
No, it hasn't. It's 3 years in the making for myself and Linda, actually. But it's been a lot of work, a lot of effort. We're working with a lot of information, luckily, because we had a lot of negatives that were left to us to work with. So we brought it all together in the past 3 years with help from some professional people, and it's come together very nicely, as you will see.
We make it sound like nobody had to work very hard. It just kind of showed up one
No.
day. But we know,
Yeah,
we know that
there's-
these things just don't happen
No, they don't.
automatically,
No,
right?
they
That,
don't.
that old burning the midnight oil thing,
Oh.
that happened to all of us, I think,
Yes.
to some extent.
This,
There's a lot of editing and
Yeah.
revision, and we had our committee of the people from the Institute also included Dr. Joseph Burke, who is chairman of the Board of Trustees of Minor Institute,
What a guy.
and his wife Joan Burke, who does a lot of work with the Alsty Minor Museum, and they both are very interested in history and very much interested in the lives of the miners. So they really helped this all come about.
I hope before we finish today that some of the older people whom I mentioned that haven't visited here and don't know much about the miners will get into the history. And I fervently hope that the youngsters will start to think about their heritage
Right.
in the North Country, which has to include
right.
the miners and the things they were
It's-
connected
I think
with.
what we're doing here is going to hopefully bring that back, because as an employee here for 21 years, our own employees don't even realize that they're living the vision of William H. Minor. Because 80 years ago, this is what he wanted to do, was education, research, and demonstration, and they're all a part of it today. And I think this exhibit with the roots and the history is, you know, kind of making people see that again, don't you think, Linda? It's just, it's a job and people work here, but now that they have something to look back on, I think it's the vision that's real important that this man had.
The mark he made was indelible. Most people who've read anything about his life are already aware of that, and we'll prove it before we finish today.
Yes.
Anybody who knows anything about the history of the Chazy School
Yes,
Knows about-
absolutely.
about William Minor.
Right.
And as I said, Physicians Hospital and so many other things that he chose to try to make work.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who's ever visited the $1 Million Dam and the
Right.
Altona Flat
Yes.
Rock region
Right.
knows, talk about visions. This
He had
guy
a vision.
was a visionary in so many ways, wasn't he?
Yes, he certainly was. And he was such a contributor back to the community that he loved,
Yeah.
the place where he was raised.
You know, we talk about that so much here, Calvin and I, in Hometown Cable. It's almost becomes mundane. But you have that feeling when you live and work here in the North Country and begin to appreciate the beauty of the people, of special, almost idyllic places like Heart's Delight Farm. Then you have the feeling you want to give back.
And I think a lot of people don't realize he still gives back today after the many years of his death, because the Chazy Central Rural School still receives an endowment from the Miner Foundation every year, and the hospital still receives an endowment from the foundation as well. So it's still giving back. What are we, 70-something years, right, after his death?
Isn't it amazing and wonderful?
So his vision was well laid out, well planned, and still working.
And his no doubt his spirit and that of Alice looking down saying, you guys did a pretty good job here.
I think I felt them a few times.
How could you help it?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, such powerful personalities.
We moved the history back. You're going to see rocks with plaques on them, brass plaques stating, it's just philosophy. And when we find them in the pictures, we moved them back right where they were, actually. So
did you really?
Yeah,
tried to be true to history?
without even trying, we did that, which was coincidental. I don't know what it was, but we did bring it back somewhat to, so that people can see the way it was.
So the legacy lives.
Yes.
Oh, yes, it certainly does.
Yes, it does.
It really does. And I think Mr. Miner didn't do anything in a small way.
No.
And
Right.
when he did something, he did it well. And that's exactly what we try to do in this honoring of the miners, is to do a good job of it.
He had some grandiose ideas and some wonderful schemes. He invented things that were a benefit to mankind,
Right.
and he put his money where his mouth was.
Absolutely.
Yes,
This is
he
the
did.
kind of guy that he was.
Absolutely.
We hope you enjoy what we have to show you today. We invite you to stay with us for our little corner. When you're celebrating a 100th anniversary, it's really nice to have some things that were around 100 years ago. And although I'm old, I wasn't here 100 years ago, and you guys have already admitted that.
We were not here 100 years ago either.
But you found some neat old stuff, like this sign up here. Tell me
Yes,
about
we
it.
did. This Heart's Delight farm sign was somewhere on the farm. We haven't got any documentation as to where it was, but we've had it in our storage for quite a long time, and we brought it back out and we put it underneath the scales here. And then the bracketry that you see holding it up were actual brackets that came off Harmony Hall, which was a guest building for all of the miners' guests. So that was in the pictures. So we put this back out just to date some of our buildings here.
I don't know if you people were even in the area when Harmony Hall was still in existence.
No, I wasn't.
But I was
Okay.
in Harmony Hall's last days. I watched it when it was in the throes of destruction as the Wreckers Ball came in.
Did you really?
Inside that was a very interesting building, and it was kind of an entertainment center along with other things.
Yeah, there was a stage area.
And it had a unique musical instrument. And that musical instrument was called an orchestrion.
Yes.
And that orchestrion has been in many places, including the Smithsonian, since it was here. And a good friend of ours, Art Pierce, who worked in the radio business with me at two local radio stations and still tunes pianos and repairs pianos, decided that the orchestrion was going to be destroyed. And I'm not sure if he paid $1 or more for the orchestrion, but they said there's only one caveat. You have to have it out of here by tomorrow afternoon.
Oh.
So we got the then sheriff of Clinton County and some old flatbed truck and came up here to Harmony Hall and took that thing apart piece by piece. It had been made in Germany. Every part was marked, mostly in German, but it was an incredible instrument that was maybe the granddaddy of the modern player piano.
It was big.
It was big. It contained a number of musical instruments that was played by air power,
Okay.
run by electric motors, and the music rolls, you've seen the rolls of music on player piano, were this big. And Art Pierce took that orchestrion down to his Macomb Street house, took it upstairs, and meticulously rebuilt it for a long period of time.
No kidding.
And before he ever put the most beautiful wooden case back on it, we listened to it play and we both cried because it was an amazing and wonderful thing. They had to build the room specially to house this thing. It had organ pipes on it.
Yeah.
It had horns. It had
We had pictures, and that's it.
just amazing. And it ended up, I think, on a riverboat somewhere in the Mississippi and out west in
No
the
kidding.
Smithsonian. And I didn't mean to jump in here and steal your thunder
Got
today.
a whole other story. That's
but
great.
a story about Harmony Hall. Okay, but some of these things are original. Now, is this building original?
This is one of the original buildings, and this was the storehouse. And anything that came into the farm, the vehicle was stopped here, and whatever was brought in was checked. This is a scales area that is in back of us here. You could bring an empty hay wagon here and
No, we ordered that flyover, but they're just about 20 minutes late. No.
an empty hay wagon could be brought, well, the empty hay wagon could be brought here and weighed, and you could go out in the field and get a load and come back and weigh it and know exactly how much grain that you had gathered from the field. And this scale has been in use until about
Last year.
last year.
Come on.
We've been using the scale for our own commodities and forages right up until last year, and we purchased a set to go next to our bunk silos so we get some of our traffic out of here. We felt that we couldn't use this any longer for that purpose.
That's cool.
So it's been in use up to that point. And this building is 1908 when this was built.
Right
And
in the right era.
Yes.
And how about the barn behind us?
1906, that
Same
barn,
era?
this barn was built in, most of the buildings were built, 90% of the buildings were built from 1903 to about 1908. That's how quickly they went up. This barn is 300 feet long and 50 feet wide, and it was built in 1 year
Ooh.
by hand.
North
No
Country
power
labor
saw.
force, huh?
A large labor force. He had a lot of people working for him at one time. When he first came in to this area with the hydro going and all of these buildings, he had close to 800 people working for him.
Anybody who hasn't seen that so-called $1 million dam would be in for a great surprise. Calvin told me about it for years before he led me by the hand through the woods and out there. It's hard to conceive that somebody would have an idea and would put so much concrete
A lot of it.
trying to
A lot.
plug up that leaky ground.
Apparently that did produce
It did.
electricity for a while,
Some,
but
it wasn't very efficient because of
Right.
the way the geology is in the area. And
Right.
Exactly.
we've
Right.
taken two very knowledgeable college professors up there to lead us around and show us that $1 million dam area. But it's still it's a modern wonder,
yes.
and it dates back all those years.
Yes.
Yes.
So what's next? Are we going to go inside, or are we going to
Why
look
not?
around? What would you like
Let's
to do?
do it.
The house,
But-
third building here.
Oh, the third building is the farm office. Tell me about that.
Okay, the farm office was built in 1908 as well. And that was built as a farm office back then for Heart's Delight Farm, and it still serves the same purpose today. Our administrative staff work out of there, and it's still a wonderful looking building.
They didn't build it out of cheap stuff, did they, Linda?
No, they did not. I don't think there was a building on the farm that was built out of any cheap stuff.
I think they meant for it to last, and I think that's absolutely terrific. Now, we're recording this on a Tuesday afternoon, and it's August 12th,
Yes, it is.
and so you had, just to let people know what's been happening, you really opened it up when, over the weekend, or when did this all start?
Yes, we opened it to the public yesterday, which would have been the 11th. We had an invitation-only party gathering on Saturday, which approximately 200 people were here. And we just had a great time. A lot of people came through, were introduced to what goes on, and so now there's a lot, and then the press has also put a nice story in the paper for us, so it's pretty well publicized now.
I hope we engender some interest in the place.
Yes.
I invited Bill and Hillary Clinton, but I guess they couldn't make it. And
Well, Bill and Hillary are pretty busy people, so maybe later in the year.
I didn't really invite them. But I think it deserves to be mentioned more and more and more. And I think maybe after today and after all you've done, it'll be on the map in ways that you never dreamed of.
I hope so.
Because you're
I
going to
hope
have to
so.
really get your patter down.
Yes,
down
we
pat
are.
after this.
And what you'll see inside is, for the most part, a real North Country product. Most of the artisans, the craftsmen, the companies that produced materials for inside are from our area. Might be a craftsman from Morrisonville, Saranac, Plattsburgh, people in Montreal. But as much as possible, we used the people in this area that have real talent that I think we don't always appreciate. We look afar and say how talented people are, but they're right here
What we talked
too.
about, isn't it, before?
They're right here.
But before we go inside, I want to also mention that this farm has exploded in size. The Miner Institute has been here for a long time, and that's part of the Miner legacy too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We're 50 years with
Yeah,
with Miner
50 years.
Institute. We're now building. We've always had an operating dairy since '71 or something like that. We are now building a brand new dairy to house about 300 head, and a whole new milking facility is being built as we speak right now. So it keeps expanding today.
The cows don't really lie on foam rubber mattresses, do they?
Sure they do.
I heard that. I said, no, come on.
Sure they do.
This is an internet ploy.
No,
They really
it's
do.
the more comfortable your animals are, the happier they are, and the more milk they produce.
Here's Ev Thomas, a good friend of ours who I worked on a local radio station, as you know, for 36 years. And Ev, before he came here, worked for other organizations and did a little radio show for me for a long time.
Yes, he did.
I mean, he's good Peasleyville stock.
Yes, he is.
You can't go
Yes.
wrong, right? So let's go inside and find out what you have. I'm excited, and I hope all our viewers are as well. William Miner was 100 years ahead of his time, Calvin said before he pressed the on button to the camera, and that sign could easily have been produced this morning, or at least since the most recent anti-smoking bill went into effect here in New York State. But nobody was allowed to smoke on this farm, not tolerated under any circumstances. And we know that's true today, right, Steve?
We try to keep it that way. We try to keep it that way.
I haven't been anywhere except inside this door so far, but I can tell this is going to be a very neat place. Mary, what's behind you?
Well, I'm Linda.
Why did I say Mary?
I don't know.
Linda, step over this way, and Calvin will
will.
take a look at it and describe what this is all about, Linda.
This is the story of the early years of William H. Miner as a child and a young boy, and of his wife Alice, and her eventual journey from Canada to Chicago, and their love story.
And it was.
And it was, and it remained that way until his death.
Steve, do you know why they called it Heart's Delight Farm?
Well, actually, as we turn the corner, we're going to have a very large gold-framed sign or picture with William H. Miner's own words printed on it, and I'd like to save it for William to tell you in his own words. He just found no better place on the earth that he could call something as nice
why
as
not
this.
call it Heart's Delight?
But that will show up in just a second. So I hate to steal the thunder from
He was a
picture.
world-renowned industrialist, and as we've said before, a philanthropist. He was also kind of a homebred philosopher, maybe not like Thoreau, but he always had these little messages of wisdom all over the place for people.
Yes, he did. There were eventually developed around the farm here several miles of drives that you could take. So the guests would be invited to go out in a horse and buggy or to take a walk. And along the way, you turn a corner and then you would find a boulder with a beautiful plaque on it. It may be Emerson, another philosopher or poet. But almost everywhere that you went about the farm, there would be something that would tell about the beauty or the joy of nature or about God and his relationship to man.
You know, in every age, there are a certain number of people who, quote, get it. He was a guy who really got it. He was interesting, kind of profound personality, but complicated, too. You know, there was a lot going on between those ears, as they say.
A lot.
And we're discovering new things. I bet you discovered new things in this process all the time, didn't you?
Always.
Absolutely.
Always.
And it's going on still. There are still letters to be read and papers to be looked over and just find out more and more about him, his business, his personal life, and goings on about the farm here. He was very much a micromanager of the farm. So there was a lot going on in the head. Beside his business in Chicago, he was certainly making sure that things ran the way he wanted them to here at the farm.
Did you launch an all-out effort to collect memorabilia for this exhibit, or did you have most of the stuff already here?
Well, we went out for some of it. We didn't have a tremendous amount. The patents that you're looking at, we had one patent, and then we've had some of them sent from Chicago now, from it would be Minor Enterprises through Mr. Dave Whitall, who owns it now. And so he sent us two of the other patents that we have on display here. Just to show the many patents that Minor did have, because a lot of people feel there was one patent that made all of his money, but I'm thinking there's, what are the numbers, up to 50?
Yes, I think that's what we
Many
heard is
more.
50.
There's 50 patents total, and even more than that, that Minor made his monies on.
The life of William Minor was very much coincidental with tremendous growth of the railroad industry. And
Right.
that's what this patent is all about.
Right.
This world-famous A-24-S minor draft gear, right?
Right. Well, the freight cars were very primitive, and they were trying to ship fruit from west to east, and everything was being damaged en route. So this is more or less a large shock absorber, and it was mounted to the bottom of the trains, so when they collided with each other, this took the shock, and thus produce and whatever else they were trying to ship was not damaged. And when his patents worked and got off the ground, they went into railroad companies very quickly, very quickly.
There are a lot of good histories, a lot of things still being written as we speak about this man and his family and his contributions. These inventions were a tremendous part of his legacy, and absolutely the world of railroading, especially the transportation in the almost embryonic produce cars where they tried to have refrigeration and so on, but there were other factors. He saw the problem in a unique way and solved it in this massive gear, right?
Exactly.
From the time that first patent was issued, it was a matter of about 3 or 4 years, and they were in place on 15,000 railroad cars.
That was
So-
always because of the power of the man. You try to get a patent, you try to do it in 3 years today and see what happens to you.
Right, right.
He knew how to do it. He was a very bright guy and studied engineering, and it's hard to believe that he was just a simple guy as a child who fell in love with farming in the North Country and then got a taste of education
Exactly.
and ran rampant with it.
A lot of people don't realize that he did study engineering and also business, and so therefore he had a very good background for developing everything that he did here.
He was certainly good for the North Country, and I
Yes.
think we have proof of that today. If we want to look behind us, you can see a picture of the building that we showed standing outside, but that picture was not taken yesterday afternoon.
No, it wasn't. This is probably more in the teens, the later teens, and if you were standing out in front of these scales just a minute ago, and here's the original sign of the Spirit of Hearts Delight Farm, and that's where we saw that it was, so we recreated that sign and put it back in its original spot. We have no idea. This probably is the store clerk checking somebody through as they were coming through on the farm at that time. But you can see the horse barn and everything in the background.
This is the inside to show the scales. They look not unlike a lot of farm scales that people have seen that still exist in barns and places. But this is where you did the actual weighing mechanically right inside.
Remove our stuff out of the way.
Oh, that's perfectly all right. I don't know what that device in the middle would be.
This is a model of a tandem spring draft gear. Minor Enterprises in Chicago, their shop people made this for us. It's the replica of another style because he just kept improving the different draft gears. So this is just another style, another version of it. It's not actual size or anything, but it just shows you what it looked like. So they sent that to us as well.
Hi, do you anticipate, now we talked before we started the camera this time about the fact that you're going to be open on a fairly regular basis for people to come by. And
Yes.
that's from when to when?
It's from May to October, and it's 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. weekdays. What we're hoping is at some point in the future, some of our retirees, our former employees, have expressed an interest in coming back and being docents and opening at other times that might be convenient for the public.
Great idea.
So we're hoping that that will happen because especially if you have someone who has a past here, then they've got their own little stories they can throw in.
There are always stories.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a story. That's the philosophy of this program and of Calvin Castine, who's been doing this long before I started, back in the beginning, back in the 80s. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are people watching this program who have correspondence, letters in the attic.
Wouldn't we love to see them?
Wouldn't you? And all they have to do is contact you. How would they get a hold
Certainly.
of folks here?
They would just give a call to Minor Institute. Our number is 846-7121, and extension 113 would be Julie Lane, and she's our contact with the public, and she'll just pass the messages on to us.
So, Julie, we got all this neat stuff out in the garage or up in the attic, and we'd love to give it all to you.
Well, we do in the library have a special room set aside for our memorabilia and for the correspondence, the photos and so forth that we have at present. So if someone were to have something that we would not be able to use here in the exhibit, we would be able to keep it permanently with the minor collection there.
Isn't that great? So let's just describe what we're looking at over here. Calvin's taking a look at railroading, the path to fortune.
Yeah, well, he's looking at a panel that was drawn up with some of the different patents on it. There's different styles of the draft friction gear, and he just kept improving upon the gear. The backdrop of the panel is actually pictures from a book that we do have, which is showing a lot of the different patents that William H. Minor did develop. We have his first order kind of in the middle of the panel, so that's the first order that went out for selling his patents, and it's just more or less giving you all the information, how he got going and started with selling these patents.
It's amazing. You wonder who designed the master plan for Minor's life. But things happened as they happened, and he used every experience, his apprenticeship, and in a machine shop on the railroad, and everything else he learned. And as we're all a culmination of everything we've done in our lifetimes, he certainly was a giant compendium of information. What's this giant wheel over here?
We have another handbrake. This is a handbrake that was used on the cars, and this is a design from Miner. You can see it in the panel up in the right corner. This was sent to us from Chicago as well for another patent to put on display. Some of these things we had no idea where we were going to get our hands on, but we were fortunate enough to get in contact with Mr. Dave Withall, and he's been very generous in helping us out with artifacts to show what William H. Miner did do.
Look at the giant spring inside here.
It's
Isn't it massive
huge.
and amazing.
Takes about 4 people to take that off from the stand.
Does it?
It's very heavy.
I guess I won't tackle it today.
No, I don't think you did.
It's very heavy.
Who,
Should we, you were talking about the buildings earlier. I just wanted to make note of the restoration that went into this building. Actually, last year, the complete undercarriage of this whole building was rebuilt. The floor was not here. Everything has been redone. So our maintenance staff that works right here at Miner did all of the work that's in this building. So
in-house?
it was all done in-house. So there's been a lot of work that's happened inside of here to get this building to where it is. And we left beams exposed, you'll see in the next room, just to show some of the
I know you're both
construction.
very pleased with it. I can tell
Oh,
by
yes.
the radiant smiles,
Yes.
because I know when committees get together and decide how you're going to do something and what's going to be placed, and sometimes those meetings can be a little bit adversarial.
Right.
But when all is said and done, then it's all worth it, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is absolutely. And I will say that the crew that we have here on maintenance, they really put their heart into it. Once they started doing it, they're a bunch of fellows that are very proud of everything they do. And so everything they do is try to do it with a real sense of quality.
They were the nuts and
They
bolts
really.
to everything that went on in here.
And you can imagine in the earlier part of the summer and some of the weeks we've had, it was a pretty sweaty gang in here
I
that
can
had to be
imagine.
working. There were no air conditioners in the window at that time.
Well, they've done a great job. Shall we move on?
Sure.
Okay. And you thought this show would never turn the corner. Well, we have turned the corner. And if you're a little bit confused by hearing Steve's voice in the background and Steve's voice in the foreground, we did that on purpose just to blow your mind. Steve did a wonderful narration here, which gives the capsule, the history. How long is that narration?
Narration goes for, the little movie goes for about 11 minutes.
Does it?
So it's not real long, but it does start you off with the basic story that you do need to know of how Miner got started and how quickly everything got created here.
It's put together beautifully. Who produced this?
Paul Frederick is the videographer who put this together, and was put together along with Sean Heffernan and Amanda Palmer from the Oasis in Plattsburgh.
It's kind of neat, huh?
Oh yeah, to have local people as skilled and talented as these two folks are.
To mention the narrator himself, you have a wonderful presentation and a great voice.
Well,
Linda said she heard his voice and thought he was over
I
here. at
thought
this
he
end
was
of the
over
building.
here, I was gonna have him do something. Had a job for him, but he wasn't available. I will say, in the videos, the DVDs and the photographs that you see around, these are all, well, I'd say, with the exception of about a dozen maybe, Miner Institute photos that came from glass plate negatives and negatives that we found a storehouse of them, and that the film that is used as original film from the teens and the 20s, 19 teens and the 1920s, of life around the farm.
Isn't it great to still have that stuff?
right.
It could have been lost in the fact that it wasn't. We had so many glass plate negatives that were taken around the North Country that still exist. And there are organizations at Plattsburgh State and elsewhere that are trying to go through them all and give us prints of some of these old glass plate negatives, but that's why the imagery is so beautiful.
It's really beautiful, and it's also because of the person working with them. Sean Heffernan and his wife Amanda just did a tremendous amount of work at bringing these plates to a very nice, clean, crisp state. And a lot of work, a lot of hours went into it. And they're, like I said again, I'll say it again, they're very skilled and very talented people.
Once again, the end product is what counts. And
That's right.
It's spectacular.
That's right.
You know, Calvin asked a question as Linda was going over looking for a laser pointer for you. What exists of besides what we've talked about today, of the minor conglomerate businesses that are offshoots, businesses that produce the equipment that he made for the railroads? They're still in business and still doing very well, aren't they?
The corporation is now Minor Enterprises in Geneva, Illinois, which is outside of Chicago, and they are still in the business of making various types of equipment for the railroad industry, and very successfully.
That's wonderful.
So that's a business that has endured for over 100 years. And upstart businesses, sometimes they don't hang around for too long.
Oh, yes, as we know, recently we've seen a few fall by the wayside. We ask a question now. There's the logo, and over on the right-hand wall is also the Heart's Delight Farm William H. Minor logo. Was that done recently?
Yes, it is. That was a very small print that was only about 3 inches square, actually, that Sean and Amanda took out of one of the farm books, and they enlarged it and scanned it and enlarged it and brought it up to that. And it's actually very beautiful with the color that's in it. But that is
so many ingredients that make you feel good to think about the North Country when you look at the grapes and the corn and the tomatoes and the wheat and that's beautiful.
That's right, the bountiful harvest that came from Heart's Delight Farm, because a lot of the products on the farm went out and were sold to hotels in New York and Chicago, and they had a great business in doing it. And it started from the ground up, from growing them and packing
well-chosen
them.
words, from the ground up.
I tell you, there was even a box factory here, so we didn't have to worry about buying boxes from someone else and then putting it on the train and sending it to whatever hotel had requested it.
Before I came around the corner, I jumped the gun and asked you how it got its name, and we have a large display that shows precisely how it got its name. And those are his, William H. Minor's, words. Excuse me. Yeah, read that to me, Steve.
You want me to read that? When I named the farm, I could not think of anything which would express my feelings toward this particular spot on Earth's surface more correctly than the phrase Heart's Delight. And it is certainly my heart's delight every time I am permitted to enjoy the beautiful things which the Creator has showered upon us with such a lavish hand, and it is an expression of the great joy reflected to me by the farm and the beautiful country round about.
Isn't that wonderful? Thank you so much for doing that.
The privacy is unique.
We like dioramas. We've had our hands in a few of them, and our good friend Ardo Monaco has too. And he had a hand in this one, didn't he, Steve?
Yes, he did. Ardo Monaco worked with us in creating the landscaping on this diorama. He's worked with all the trees and the elevations and the gardens and shrubbery and really put life back into Heart's Delight Farm by working with this. He's got he recreated people working in the fields that you can see over behind the horse barns, out in the back underneath our video. You can see men working and cutting wood and trees and horses drawing stuff around. So he really did put life back into this. The buildings that you see have all been built by the inmates at Clinton Correctional Facility and Altona Correctional Facility. So they've put a lot of heart into these buildings. We had blueprints in our archives for every single one of the buildings that you see here.
You gotta be kidding.
We still have all the blueprints for every one of these buildings that are gone. And they sized them down, put them into their computer and sized them down to 1/10 scale, and then laid it out and started creating Heart's Delight Farm for us.
Absolutely beautiful. All right, describe it for me.
Well, if you want to look at this very long horse barn right here, that's the building that's still in existence today. Unfortunately, our farm office is still on the computer right now. It hasn't been constructed, so that building's not there. But you are standing in this building. This is the actual exhibit that we're in right now. So everything back this way is gone. All of the buildings behind the exhibit have been torn down and are not in existence today. We can talk about what some of them are. Buildings right here behind our exhibit center are piggeries. This was called the East Piggery, and this was called the West Piggery. And then we also have the coach barn and barn number 10. They did call this one, some people did, but that was the big barn. And this barn was built right over the top of the original homestead. He didn't tear it down. He kept it right in place. And the same thing goes for Heart's Delight Cottage. This building here is Heart's Delight Cottage. And he built right over his uncle's farmstead as well. He obviously, it was coming from his heart, the construction. He chose not to tear down the buildings that he grew up in, and he built right over the top of them. You can see a tower located right here, and that was called the house tower. And the house tower had a 6,000-gallon water tank located on the top, and he was putting pressurized water into all of the buildings. And that was a 1903 construction as well. So right in 1903, he was bringing in the technologies that he experienced in the Midwest and incorporating them right into his farm. And we have numerous other buildings here that are laid out. We have the old hennery, this is called, so this is where the chickens were. We have a smokehouse located right here, and it's also attached to the dairy building. And the dairy building is then attached to the ice machine building. And the reason for it is on this reservoir, Mr. Miner developed a reservoir to hold 1 million gallons of water, and one of the reasons for the reservoir was to cut ice in the wintertime for refrigeration. And we have some really nice pictures of ramps built right along this area, and they're pushing chunks of ice into the ice house for summer storage. The other reason for developing a reservoir was for fire protection. Mr. Miner had fire lines and fire hydrants located throughout the building so that they would have fire protection in case there ever was a fire. We can move on to this building with the large smokestack, and that building is the powerhouse. And the powerhouse was producing centralized steam heat, which he was piping over ground, actually, to the surrounding buildings for heat. So his technologies were brought in right at the very beginning of construction.
Well, he had electricity here before they had it in the Capitol in Albany, for example, right?
Exactly. There was electricity in the dairy barns before the governor's mansion in Albany, and that was
Think about it.
probably somewhere around 1907. Somewhere around that time that came in.
And that is a story we have heard over the years and wanted to verify. So we did contact the proper people in Albany, and they did reply that the governor's mansion was electrified in 1909. So we beat them by 2 years.
There you see, we try not to embellish the facts too much on this program. Occasionally I stray, but we don't want the experts to be called fibbers. It's wonderful.
We have a steel tower in the background located right there. If you go, the picture in the backdrop is the same as the diorama. You can see the steel tower right here. So everything's laid out the same way. The steel tower was about 125 feet high, and it had 60,000 gallons of water in it. That was a fire protection tower. And they had a sprinkler system connected to that, and that was connected to most of the surrounding buildings for fire protection as well. And then we can move on to Harmony Hall, and the Miners entertained many important people around the country, and I think as I don't know if you could say his house got smaller, or the guests got more abundant, he built Harmony Hall, which it was meant for his guests to stay in. And there were 10 bedrooms on the second and third level each having their own bath. And the bottom level of that building was a stage area with seating for 300 people. So it was entertainment and guests that were visiting the farm.
This is no small project. If you look at the little teeny cattle here, which
Well,
we're only 4 feet away.
Well, you're not a very good farmer. Those are sheep.
Those are sheep, well, they're not cattle. I'm a very old farmer, and I can't see that far.
Those are older sheep then.
Oh, they are.
Older cattle.
Well, we know they're creatures, and most of them have 4 legs, so
Yeah.
that's
They're
cool.
so tiny, it is hard to tell. We do have a lot of cattle on the other side, but Ardo and his folks did a wonderful job at putting this together for us, along with the inmates. Many hours went into putting these buildings together for us, and we do appreciate it.
It's a very impressive diorama. I'm just glancing around the room, some things we haven't seen. There's, for example, over here in the corner, what have we got?
Well, we have conditions. These are 2 blueprints. We have conditions in 1903. These are maps that were in our archive, and these are actually recreated. We had the inmates had some linen, some blueprint linen, and they traced them for us.
You gotta be kidding.
No,
Isn't
these are
that
tracings
marvelous?
that our inmates did for us. And in this first one, you'll see conditions in 1903 with just, if I can get in here.
Sure.
There's just the house and the barns, the way it was when he grew up as a child. And within an 8 to 10 year period, it expanded into this facility. And it happened that quickly. So this is just a layout. When he came in 1903, he didn't just kind of say we want a hen house over here and a horse barn over here. He had everything architecturally drawn out, and it was all laid out in blueprint form in 1903 when he came. Everything was a master plan, and in order to do something this large in 8 years, it had to be well thought out, well planned, the right people working for you. So he knew what he wanted when he came.
He wanted to impress us in 2003. He certainly did a wonderful job on me. What have we got next to us here? Linda,
This
tell me
is
about it.
this is just one of the many plaques that were placed around the farm. Some of them on some of the various buildings, and as I said before, some of them on boulders along pathways and so forth. This is one that has some references to God by Edwin Markham, who is a renowned poet. So he used a lot of the poets and philosophers that were popular around the turn of the century to express how he felt about the earth and using the earth and reverence for nature.
They're really terrific, and the fact that they survive, and you don't have any idea where that one was originally placed?
I don't. I have not seen any photo that has it on it. That would be our way of identifying where something was specifically.
This one was strictly chose for the building. You can see some of these other ones. This room concentrates on the construction of the farm, and the fourth line in here, they lay the deep foundation stone by stone, and this is basically to honor the people who built the farm.
Almost as well as he thought out how he wanted to build this place, you folks had to think out how you wanted to build this place.
Yes.
Place.
Yeah.
That's
They
right.
came to life as
Sean Heffernan has this saying that he would repeat to us. Don't worry, it's all going to come together. And you don't know how nervous you can be when someone says, don't worry, it's all going to come together, and
Don't
you
worry,
don't
be
know how
happy.
it's going to come together. But it did. Everything just began to fall into its proper place all by itself. That you just knew where things would be in the exhibit. So
A philosopher far greater than I said, somebody said, boy, it was real lucky how this turned out. And the person said, good luck is intense and tremendous preparation. And then when the door opens, you jump inside. When the opportunity is there, you go for it. But you had a lot of talented wonderful, insightful people working on this, and I
Yes.
just want to make sure there as many people as possible who had a hand in it are given credit as we go along, because it's very special.
Took a lot of people to bring it together, and it came together very smoothly, and it worked real well. So we're very pleased with everything.
All right, I guess we can move along a little bit and talk as we go, and you can tell us. Or just a minute, Calvin's got an idea. Oh, we haven't done this panel yet. All right, let's talk a little bit about the actual construction then.
This one's actually showing the intensity of construction. I had to rearrange this panel a little bit with Sean and Amanda. I having 4,000 images in my hand to work with.
Oh, is that all?
But we couldn't show them all in one panel. And what you're looking at in the backdrop of this panel with the rafters, this is the construction of the horse barn located right outside. And as you can see, there's many men in the background with a hatchet in his hand. And this was all constructed by hand. And again, a 300-foot barn was built in 1 year. But not only was one barn built in 1 year, what we wanted to do was show the intensity of construction. And in each one of these, we labeled them with the year. And this is a group of buildings built in 1903. We couldn't show all the pictures, so they'll be listed here. But 1904 and 5, and you can see the intensity of construction just grew. And that many buildings were built in just an 8-year period. So we tried to show pictures, as many pictures as we could of the buildings that went up. There's everything from piggeries to corn cribs to henneries to trout ponds to duck houses and cottages. Most of the areas, the sheep barns that were built in 1906 as well, he would build cottages, and the departments, the head of those departments would live in those cottages and stay right in those areas. So he was providing houses for the people actually working for him and running the facility for him. So everything was very, very well planned and thought out.
This is a very, very tasteful display. Having it superimposed on the actual barn construction is so neat.
They did a great job.
I
They
think
did a
that's-
great job.
That's fantastic. I'm sorry I missed that on the way through. I looked at it and I just thought maybe Calvin had done so. All right, let's turn the corner again and talk about what we're looking at.
Have been repaired.
See, when you watch Hometown Cable in our little corner, it's not the fastest moving tour in the world because we don't want to miss anything. Look at this little group of this little collage of photographs. What have we got here, Steve?
Well, after we constructed the buildings for you on the other panels, we thought it was only appropriate to have a panel that showed folks that made it all work, and that's what this panel is. And there's a collage of pictures of the different people in their job settings, showing you exactly what some of the things that they did do. And we have poultry pickers and people in the garden, greenhouses working, and blacksmiths. So we have little bit of everything. And then the backdrop picture that you're seeing here is actually the grist mill, where they used to process grains, and a great picture of percherons hooked up to a sleigh
Aren't they beautiful with the dapples on them?
with much of the, if you were to get close, I mean, when you come here and look, you will be able to see many nationalities in the faces of these people, because he had Russian and Italian people working for him and Polish people working here. And when you get up close, the hats and the faces will certainly pull out the many different nationalities of people that worked with the miners on this farm to make it all come together.
That's pretty great. How long did it take you to figure out just this one panel? More than a week and a half, I bet.
There's a lot of research gone into the images that's in this place. A lot of research gone into it.
I love it. That one, I could look at that one. You could look at
You
that
can-
one for an hour,
I think people appreciate this one. This is one of my very favorites
Me
because
too.
it's the worker bees. And as Steve said, it's the people that made it all happen, and you can relate to that. You can relate to being a worker on the farm, to being a worker in a company, and what your place would be. The one on the bottom on the right is probably my favorite photo in the exhibit, and we have an enlarged photo of that man. And to me, it's just the dignity of a worker. When you see the photo later, you'll see he's patched and pinned and held together in various ways, but he still stands there very proud to be doing his job on the
I was
farm.
thinking as I looked at that, I've leaned on a lot of shovels in my lifetime. I never looked quite that good
There-
doing it.
I don't know. There's just something about his face that is just really special.
It's great. All right, moving right along. What's next, Steve? Let me get over here next to you.
We just have another, it's an unidentified worker. He's in the workshop and he's working on sharpening up some of the tools. That building that you're looking in is the blacksmith shop, and that building is in existence today. We still have that. It's not a blacksmith shop anymore, but we do store different crop items in there. So it's still used on the farm today.
Some of the equipment you see here is familiar to people who've been around horses for any length of
Absolutely,
time. That's
absolutely.
great. Very nice lighting in here too. That's another choice you have to make so everything's clearly visible to people.
All of the displays are lit up so that you're going to be able to view them very clearly. We have a view of Percheron horses and their handlers in this view. We're not sure on the year. Most of our glass plate negatives were not dated, so we can't really put a year on.
A lot of wintertime
them.
shots there with
Yes,
the ear
there
flaps
is.
and the snow
Yes,
on the
there
ground.
is. It's interesting to look at the different clothing and the hats and the footwear and what they were wearing back then. It's real interesting.
Just great stuff. I love it. Where do we want to look next?
Well, we tried to cover every corner. This one's on putting the waters to work, and we want to talk about the hydropower that William H. Miner was working on when he originally started in 1903. So he got right on it and got hydro going and was bringing in electricity into the farm. So this is giving you some information on where he did it, how big some of the generation plants were, and some really nice views of where it all came from.
In the middle, of course, is a picture of the Lake Alice Dam, which is only, less than 2 miles from here.
That's right. That's
And
right.
a familiar place to many who like to take the nature walk in the spring and fall and watch those beautiful Canadian geese as they settle in here, as that's was turned over to the state, I think, some years ago, right, Linda?
I'm not sure exactly what the date is on that, but it's now under the auspices of the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation.
We've spent some delicious moments there, Calvin and myself, and watched the tremendous flocks of geese flying overhead as we were talking in the fall there during tours. On the upper right-hand corner, the Altona Flat Rock or $1 Million Dam that we referenced earlier that
Yes.
Calvin and I have walked along and looked at the old handprints and footprints and signatures in the concrete, and it's been a pretty popular spot over the years. Next to that is the dairy building and the tower that we saw
Yes.
in the actual diorama a
Yes.
short time ago.
And then we're coming to something really special here.
Wow.
This is the Cafe Martin, which is
The
Purple
biggest
Martin
Martin
birdhouse.
house I have ever seen.
Well, this actually is a 1/4 scale model. So the base pillar was 20 feet tall. And then it's described over there, but I know that the length of this was 12 feet. So you can just imagine. It had roosts for 500 purple martins. It was placed at the side of the reservoir. Purple martins love mosquitoes. Mosquitoes love still water in reservoirs.
How well we know with the West Nile virus threat this year, huh?
Exactly. So this was one of Mr. Miner's ways of beautifying the landscape and taking care of a little mosquito problem.
This is pretty special all by itself when you look at the process of just
Yes.
getting this thing
Yes.
up on the pedestal and getting it in place. I'm not sure that they didn't build the pyramids that way, but I'm not sure.
It is a
But
huge-
that's kind of neat to talk about an engineering feat just to
Yes.
get it up
I
there.
don't know if Linda, did you state the size of it?
Oh, yeah, holy.
I knew it was 12 feet across. I can't remember how wide and tall it is. I
Okay,
did
it
say
was 12 feet long, it was 8 feet wide, and it was 10 feet high. And then it stood on a pedestal 20 feet off the ground. And we did a little research on purple martins on the internet just recently, and they state that birdhouses, they're very picky as to where they live, and birdhouses want to be 20 feet off the ground. And so it shows you that he did his homework and research before he did anything. It wasn't just aesthetics, it was technology.
I have a much, much less ambitious Martin house on my property that has the appropriate pole. And it's been there for about 10 years and has never yet had a Martin family in it. Every other bird that's indigenous to this area and some that came just to visit for a season have nested there. But I've never had the Martins. This makes you embarrassed even to put up a plain Martin house, doesn't it?
Beautiful.
This is beautiful, and this is an example of the craftsmanship from the North Country.
Oh, this is
This was built by Jim West, who works for West Brothers Construction Company, son of Dick West. And I think it's something like 200 hours
Yeah.
put into this
Dick West's
project.
daughter works here, right?
Yes, she
Yes.
does. She works here in accounting. And the Wests have quite a history of a connection here because they had, I think a grandfather was the master carpenter on the farm.
Exactly.
So
Everything's tied
There's a
together.
It is.
connection. There's a connection, that's right.
it is. But this is really beautiful workmanship. I'd like to have it, but I can't pay to have
No,
it
you
done.
can come in here and admire it anytime you want to. Oh, we got some neat stuff here too. Who wants to talk about it?
Well, these are just some of the products that came from the farm. Sausages, bacons, there were melons, lots of maple syrup, eggs. There were just a number of items that were shipped. They also raised a lot of trout, shipped trout. Of course, there was beef and there was, they had lamb. They had all kinds of meat products that they shipped also. We have here a couple of medals by two of the early champions that were brought to the farm for breeding purposes. And Mr. Miner would go as far as Europe to obtain championship stock with which to build the various breeds of animals on the farm.
Just great memorabilia. Look at the butter box over here. Isn't that neat?
Yes, yes.
Charles and Company, and these are what would be the tops of lightning rods or lightning arresters. And not to mention the maple syrup and the milk and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And the calendar, which is up on the wall, that's kind of cool too.
It is, and that shows even more of the products that they had available. And you can see lard and you can see hams on there. All kinds of farm products that you could imagine. A lot of eggs, of course, shipped, and the chickens too for meat.
And if it weren't for the modern digital age, those things could never have been reproduced so absolutely stunningly
Yes.
beautiful. Those people did a magnificent job.
Yes, and you notice on each of these products, and up there he's very proudly putting his logo of Heart's Delight Farm.
Oh, of course.
The heart and the maple leaf combined in that logo.
How could it not be a popular logo, right?
Right, right.
All right, next.
Still working today, his logo is,
Oh,
with
sure.
Miner Institute. Oh, we just have some little minor details. This is
Some little minor details.
information that we had found, and this is back about 1918 is what it's talking about. And they just talk about how many animals that were on the farm. It's interesting to look at some of them. Number of brook trout that were hatched each year were 500,000.
500,000 brook trout.
The amount of trout taken from the hatcheries each year were 19 tons. So this was not small scale. It was very large scale in the way things were happening. And then we have our tillable land that was working. another one, the sausage. Sausage shipped per year was 25,000 pounds. So there was a whole lot of different products going out of this farm at one time. Number of people employed on the farm were 800. But that goes back into the hydro and building the dams. So in the whole creation of this, there was a tremendous amount of people working here.
Do you have any of the old ledgers, Steve? Pay ledgers?
No, I don't know. Linda might
We
be
don't
more-
know. We don't know for sure because we haven't explored everything yet that's in the safe where all those sort of financial records would be. So we're hoping that if we dig deep enough, we're going to find some of
It
those
is. It's
items.
almost like an archaeological dig
Oh,
when you
you
get
just
back in your
keep on
fingers, you have to
going.
pour
It would
through
be
it, one
interesting.
object at a time.
It
Yes.
would be interesting to see what people were paid at that time, and he employed so many people here. There were different nationalities. Apparently, he was getting skilled labor from those docks in New York City. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
And
what
so
we
there
understand.
were Italian camps that were built that I have blueprints for, and these different camps were built around the area for the different nationalities of people that he brought in to build this.
Over the weekend, and I was taping the Harris Corporation Sheridan Iron Works reunion. In their archives there, they have an old ledger from the early 1900s. And the average, or the most common, I shouldn't say the average, but the most common daily rate was $1.25 for the day's work, 10-hour days, of course. And many of them, written in there, were where you'd see they'd take home some coal as part of their payment. So I'm sure people working here also took products home for their payment.
I'm sure.
Sure, I mean, when you got 25,000 pounds of sausage and
Nobody went hungry.
50,000 quarts of blueberries and...
That's a lot of blue fingers,
Oh, I
isn't
love
it?
it.
A lot of
I
blue
love it.
fingers on that.
I'm a blueberry fancier. Okay. All right, let's go back here. But before we even talk about what's on this pedal, I want to talk for a moment about the construction of the format for the frame and the wrought iron, and this is just amazing and wonderful and tasteful all at the same time.
Attention to detail. Sean was very attentive to that, and we use people in our area to create the frame that you see the panels in, and also the ironwork that's holding them up. We're from local artisans, and I think Linda
Had some
got the
names.
list.
She just has the
I
list.
just happened to.
All right.
The framework was Hal Moore of Saranac Hollow Woodworking in Saranac. And the brackets were done by Jerry Taylor of Plattsburgh. And
Should
also
have known.
Tim LaForest, who is on our staff, had constructed some of those also. So they're really beautiful. I think they really blend in with the atmosphere that we wanted here, that farm, simple look.
Is there anybody who doesn't love horses? I mean, I have an innate love for horses. I'm not sure that I wasn't related to one in a previous life, but these faithful friends, as you call them here, are just wonderful. Boy, we had some great breeds here, didn't we?
You certainly do. Miner also did everything, even the breeds of animals which he brought onto the farm were of the best bloodlines. As you can see in this picture, we have Ile-de-France, who is a breeding stallion that he purchased from France and actually shipped him over here along with different mares to start a breeding stock right here on Heart's Delight Farm of purebred Percheron horses. And he also did the same thing with the breeding stallion from the Belgian breed, which is Richelieu. And they were the main breeding stock for creating the horses that were working on the farm.
Those amazing champions, as you can see.
And as
by
you can
the
see,
listing.
yes, that's
Yeah.
right. They were shown throughout the country, all the way from Chicago, New York City, and all over the place. And they brought back first and champion. They were very, very good breeds. So he did find the best that he could find. He also brought in shorthorn beef cows and some really good breed lines that on the farm, and he also had Holstein cows on the farm, and we have pictures of those on this panel as well. So he just searched for the best of the breeds to demonstrate and show the best of farming and agriculture that he could in the area.
From the Heart's Delight Farm Book, our shorthorns are not pampered, but are raised under conditions which ensure a strong constitution, well-proportioned outlines, and good coats of hair.
Absolutely.
Isn't that
absolutely.
beautiful? I love it.
Animals were well taken care of on the farm, that's for sure.
Everything was done in a special way. The fact that very early on, these acres produced more and better crops than almost anywhere in the North Country or in the nation. And that was not for a lack of effort. I mean, he put so much effort into having just the right conditions,
Absolutely.
just the right fertilizers, just the right, amount of everything.
Absolutely.
And miners does much the same today with all their special blends and brands and mixtures of seed and
We're still into research, and we're still doing crop research, and also interfacing that with nutrition research with animals to help dairy industry today.
Believe me, the dairy industry needs a lot of help today. We've talked about that many times before, and I'll use almost any soapbox in any forum to talk about the plight of the American farmer. And I don't know what's to be done about it, but I do know how many family farms have to be sold and how many tears are shed at every one of those auctions every year.
Absolutely.
Somebody better do something about getting those milk prices up for our great farmers. All right, this side.
Well, the other side of the panel is showing some of the other breeds of animals that were on the farm. We have Dorset and South Down sheep were the two breeds that he actually imported over from England. And one of the first importers in the country, actually, for Dorset sheep to have in this country. And then you've got the swine. I think we have South Down, I'm trying to remember. Chester White and Yorkshire breeds were the two breeds that were on the farm. And there were many piggeries on the farm. There were at least 4 or 5 piggeries on the farm. So there were a lot of pigs running around, and you can see in the different pictures here. He also had poultry on the farm. He had many chickens, turkeys and he also had squab and pheasant, I believe, running on the farm. And then he had to get into a little bit of exotic stuff with bison, some deer, and some elk were also running around on the farm.
Don't you wish you could just transport yourself back in time to about 1908 and walk the fields, huh?
Well, you can't
In
do
a manner,
it,
you're
but
doing this here with this display. but-
I'm hoping that's what this display does, is make you feel like you can kind of take a small trip back and see what life actually was at Heart's Delight Farm back at that time. So hopefully we're going to pull back some of that. Some of the folks going through today are already reminiscing and bringing up some old stories from their times
We
of being
saw
here.
Restaurant
so-
Lee and his wife in here, and Ruff we were talking about how much salary we were making. Russ says, yeah, I think I made 25 cents an hour. And his brother retired from this farm after working here well over 4 decades. So talk about a connection. And he
Absolutely.
walked in and he was lamenting the fact that some of the beautiful buildings had been torn down, as you said,
Yes.
years ago. But memories, we all have tremendous memories, and after anybody visits this great display at Heart's Delight Farm up in Chazy, I imagine we'll create a whole bunch of new memories. And why does it say, and it laughs a harvest? Because Gerald said we tickle the earth with a plow, and it laughs a harvest. Is that one of the classic lines of all time?
And when I really think about it, I think we're doing a lot more than tickling that earth with the plow. If I look at these fellows working here, they work pretty hard. But it was true that they got quite a harvest. We actually looked a little bit into the records because it seemed almost unbelievable that he could produce 3 times as much as the national average on some of these things as corn or oats or hay. But when we took the figures that were in his books in the early 1900s and compared them with what the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, has online for those years, we found that it was absolutely so, that he did far exceed what the national average was for these sorts of harvests.
You mentioned micromanaging. That's what it takes to have results like that. Not just what you see out there with men who are breaking their backs, swinging those pitchforks and working to load the product, but proper drainage. These are things that farmers talk about today, Steve, right?
You're absolutely
We're gonna
right.
see
We
that,
do
too.
we do have a panel that displays the tiling that went in. Unfortunately, we don't have any views of the tile in our display today, but we do have them. They were just clay tile about a foot long, and they would lay them actually on a cypress board in the ground so that they would kind of stabilize and stay in a straight line. And Miner was one of the first to be tiling the land in this area to allow the farmer to get out earlier in the season to plant the crops and get it out there earlier. So his technologies just continue to keep on going, and they're still in place today. So actually a lot of the land tile that he put in the early 1900s are still working today.
Is that a tribute?
Amazing. It certainly
A 100-year tribute. You're going to point something else out here.
What I was going to say, as we've gone along here on some of these panels, you may have noticed some of these colored illustrations. And each year, Heart's Delight Farm would produce a calendar, which he would send out to business acquaintances and friends, that was kind of a display of what was going on at the farm, some of the beautiful portraits of the farm, a lot of portraits of the animals and the men at work. And these are real treasures. There are people around the area that have them that have told us about some of them that they have. It's just really nice to see what it was like back then and to see some color that they placed in some of their illustrations.
Will you have any kind of a rotating exhibit here as you find new things? Will you add them to the collection here, or how do you plan to do that in the future?
Well, I guess it's going to depend on what we unearth or what someone else unearths.
Oh, I know
and
you
give
guys.
to
You'll be
us.
in there looking for stuff every
But
day.
we would like to add things that would just make it more enjoyable, more authentic, and give people a better idea of what things were like back then at the turn of the 20th century.
I think this building's going to be outgrown in about a week and a half by the way you're doing. Look at this, these beautiful old tractors.
This is a beautiful view.
my
This
goodness.
is our barn that's in place today, the horse barn that's right out front as you drive up to our exhibit. And they're bringing in the harvest. Back then, I think that's probably corn that they're pushing through the blower and going up into the silos. And it's just again, I want to talk about the skills and talents of the people who put this together. You can literally walk into this picture. It's done so well. And Sean and Amanda from the Oasis just did a wonderful job of creating these panels for us.
Wisps of smoke, and it's so real.
All details show, everything shows in here. What you can see, is for people who don't know, the track that you see connecting these buildings, those were utilities. Steam, heat, electricity, and circulating hot water were in those tracks. Connecting the buildings, as I stated earlier, we had a powerhouse that was producing centralized steam heat. So he was putting heat into the buildings through those tracks that you see, and the horse and buggies would go underneath them. And later, they went into subways. We do have tunnels now connecting our buildings, and all of our utilities are in the tunnels. So this is just a great shot. Like I said, it shows everything, and you can see the farm office in the background. And probably a couple of the head of department people in the back talking to themselves about
How small was this photograph? Can you tell me, was this a glass plate?
This was probably a glass plate. I actually have some samples of them. I could go get one
At some
so
point
that you
in
could
time,
see.
people know what glass plates are. They're relatively large.
The glass plates are good size. What would you
About
say?
8 by 10,
Eight-
something
8 by
on
10
that
or
order.
Yeah.
that order.
We did have other negatives that we were using. I don't know if they call them acetate type negatives, just the film type negatives. The first trunk of pictures that I opened up had 42 books of negatives. And some of the books containing 100 in each book. But the nice thing about these books of negatives, and they're all preserved in wax paper sleeves, so they did it right back then. They knew how to preserve them. All of those were dated and archived. That's why we're being able to tell you that building was built in 1 year. because the
Librarians
pictures
like
show
that,
it.
don't they,
Oh, they
Linda?
love that sort of
And
thing.
so that's how
Yes.
we're really putting together, because nobody knew how long it took to build this place. Nobody knew how quickly it went up and the stages in which things were constructed. So we were able to piece that sort of thing together with the dates and the titles that were on the negatives.
Boy, that's absolutely
It's-
wonderful. How many of us have drawers and boxes full of photographs with nothing written on them?
I
We
don't want to
even-
mention any names.
We don't even know our great aunts and uncles' names and their fathers and grandfathers, and what a tragedy.
Absolutely.
All right, there's the plaque
Wow.
from Harmony Hall.
It's hard not to pay tribute to a building as beautiful as Harmony Hall. So we haven't been able, we didn't have it recreated in a model form, but we did want to at least show some really nice views of it in pictures. And then we do have a 3D bronze plaque that was in Harmony Hall, probably sitting on a mantle or something in the main entrance or something. So we did do a little, and then we took one of our blueprints, we had it matted, and so you can see an elevation side of Harmony Hall, which was really a very grand building. It had an elevator on one side of it, which serviced all 3 floors for its time, and this building was built in 1914. But it was just
As I told you, it was still beautiful to me days before it was demolished.
yes. Yeah.
So those are treasured memories for me. Look at the Hearts Delight Cottage here.
Well, if you want to start off by showing Hearts Delight Cottage, I mean, this building, when I see it in pictures, it looked large, but when Jim West recreated it to this 3D view, it was just unbelievable to think that 2 people were living in this home. If you count them, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chimneys on it. Those were all fireplaces throughout the building. It was just a beautiful home, and it went through many stages of construction, and you will see that in some of our exhibits. But I think every year there was always some sort of hammering going on this building and enlarging it, and it just kept on growing. And people want to remember that this home was built over the original homestead. He did not tear down his uncle's home. He built this cottage over the top of it. So
Don't you think that in itself is significant?
Oh, absolutely. It just shows the love that he had for this farm and this area.
We should all-
And for family, too.
We should all feel our roots like that and perpetuate that feeling by building.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
I will say, I have seen some people give a little chuckle when they see that this is called Heart's Delight Cottage, as their idea of a
Yes,
cottage is somewhat different.
I've seen some
than
rather
this.
ambitious construction called cottages.
This was, I think it ended up to be 46 rooms or 47 rooms, I'm not sure, but very, very large.
Beautiful wicker furniture,
Yes.
the lamp, the tasteful lamps. Obviously a Tiffany over there, you can count on that.
beautiful,
Yes.
beautiful, very expensive Tiffany lamps were inside. The rugs
Same
were
thing with a chandelier.
absolutely, absolutely. Now, some of actually, a lot of the bedroom furniture and the antique furniture that was in Heart's Delight Cottage is now in our guest house, Shadow Lawn, because we didn't know that until we started going through these pictures, and we're finding the furniture sets
Saw that chair.
are sitting over at our guest house in Châtillon. So we do have some of the antique furniture that went with this house. I might want to add that our chair of the board, Joe Burke, did the landscaping around this model. So
Did he really?
So we got him on here doing some shrubbery and laying out rocks.
That's pretty great. That's a great model. I wonder how long it took him to build that.
I'm not sure. I think that was just about as long as the birdhouse, which was around 200 hours. So
Oh,
A lot of time.
that's a real dedication, isn't it, huh?
yes.
He did a great job.
Thanks to local artisans here in the North Country, that's one of the reasons we have what we have here today. When did the finishing touches really get put on this building? Within the last few weeks?
3 weeks ago, there was nothing on the wall in here. And I was getting very nervous. Sean and Amanda had everything together. They knew where it was, in what state it was being created. I wasn't quite up to par with all that, but I was getting a little nervous, but it really just came together very quickly. Everything just really worked out real well, and
Doesn't he sound like he's been studying this thing for about 22 years? In a way, he has.
in a way. We also matted and framed 2 3D views of Heart's Delight Cottage, and it actually shows the 1903 version when they first started remodeling his Uncle John's home, and then this is a 1914 version, and it just kind of shows a little bit of an expansion happening there. So you have a first and a second floor level. You might know on all of the rooms that you see on the first level, there's 1 bathroom on that whole floor. But I think there's 11 bedrooms on the second floor, and each bedroom has their own bath. And that was in 1914 when this expanded, and people did not have running water at that time.
I don't think we had running water till the 50s at my house. And we certainly didn't have a bathroom in every bedroom.
No. Still don't.
All right, here's the drain tile technology that Steve was talking about before. Talk about being almost ahead of its time.
Well,
it was certainly on the cusp, wasn't it?
He actually was, and I'm not real familiar with the machine that's digging the trench that you see, but that's probably a coal-operated steam engine that's working this, and it was just a wheel that went around and it scooped out the dirt, and which allowed them to then lay their drainage tile and tile the different croplands. We have a great illustrated view of how some of that tiling might have happened back at that time, and interesting, whenever you drain a piece of property, it's got to have a place to go. And here you can see pictures of men, probably about 25 of them, actually lowering the channel of Corbu Creek so that their tiled land would have a place to go. And there's no backhoe in that picture, I don't think. It's all being done by hand. So it's pretty interesting. And then there's a fair amount of information on the acreage and things that happened at that time.
And as you mentioned before, some of that tile is still working in 2003.
Absolutely. I don't know, Linda, you're pretty familiar with Alice.
Oh, what a lady. What a lady. We've been talking about Mr. Miner a lot, but you know, you have to mention Alice T. Don't
Yes, you do. And we thought it was appropriate to say that Alice was really his first Heart's Delight, even before the farm itself. And he and Alice met in Chicago when he was early on in his business career. They married in 1895, and a few years later they had a son. Unfortunately, that child only lived for 2 weeks. And that was in 1902. By 1903, they were coming back here to build a retreat here in Chazy. We're not sure exactly what occurred in their minds, but certainly that may have played a part in thinking of home and family and roots. And unfortunately for the miners, there was never another child. So their child was the farm, and their family were the people that worked the farm. That Mr. Miner went on business trips constantly, and at the museum, the Alice T. Miner Museum, they have boxes of letters of correspondence going back and forth. And he had various titles of endearment for her, Dear Heart, and so forth. And that's a kind of pleasure to be able to read those at one point or another. Mrs. Miner lived for 20 years after Mr. Miner died, and she was still involved in the community, in the Presbyterian Church, in the board of the school, the hospital, and in the boards on Miner Incorporated in Chicago. Began to live here full-time after his death because they did sort of move back and forth. This is a couple of portraits that portray the miners in a different way than we usually see. We usually see a much more austere, older portrait, very formal looking. And these are a little bit more whimsy to them than that. We think they were probably taken sometime around their early to mid-40s for both of them. And it's likely these were portraits taken in New York City. So we kind
Great
of
shots,
look.
aren't they?
They are. They
Just
really are.
absolutely marvelous and wonderful.
And behind the glass here, we
Oh, boy,
have
look at
some
this.
really special items.
Oh boy.
This is from Mrs. Miner's dresser, some of her personal hair pieces.
That's
We
real
have
silver, folks.
Some of the china that is gold edged with their initials on it. In the middle here, we have a Christmas gift from Mr. Miner to Mrs. Miner, a beautiful purse. The birth announcement of their son in 1902. Over here is probably the fanciest thank you note I've ever seen. And that is a note by someone who came to stay on the farm and just couldn't get over how lovely it was, and this was his way to pay tribute. Down in the bottom here of the case, we've got just a sample of one of the guest books from over the years at the farm. So there were quite a number of guests that would come. They had several guest books that they filled over the years.
Isn't it wonderful? Salt Lake City, New York City, Chicago.
Yes.
From all over the place. Huh?
All over the United States.
Such wonderful, tasteful displays. Look at this. It seemed to me like I saw a cart going past the building a little
Yes,
while
we
ago.
did. Yes, we did see a horse and buggy going by, doing a little training, I think. We actually published this in a little newsletter from the town of Chazy, trying to identify who these children were, and we didn't get any response, but we're hoping that sooner or later someone comes through and is able to say, oh, that was grandma or great-grandma or great-grandpa, along with some of the other people that aren't named, that perhaps they have a photo somewhere in their collection that's identical, and we'll be able to find out who some of these people are.
So we're talking. At least
Yes.
we know Donk the Donkey is here.
Donk
anyway.
the donkey, we know, yes. We had earlier we had Betty the horse identified,
Oh,
not who the driver was.
Oh, look,
We've
look
got
at
another
this.
of our signs here, and it was fairly strict here. So no profanity, improper language, and loud talking strictly prohibited.
Yeah, don't go see the union steward, because if you
I
do,
don't
you're
think-
out of here. I love it.
And offenders will be subject to prompt discharge. So
You're
he
out of here.
was, yes.
I love it. Junior Barber in the background. That sets my
That's right,
stage, all right.
absolutely.
What a great guy and a fine musician playing with so many wonderful bands and the
Told you,
Gibsons
local
for so many
yokels and
years.
local talent. We've got it.
Local yokels. I'll speak for myself.
Okay.
Here is the larger version of that absolutely classic photographs. And if the other couple hadn't been on the cornflakes box, this one would have made it.
You're
You know, all he
absolutely right.
needs is the farm wife with the pitchfork, and that's
Yes.
just, there is an absolute study.
You can.
And you don't have to have anybody tint it with the appropriate colors because
No.
it's colorful enough all by
It
itself,
is.
isn't it?
The left shoulder's got a little bit of a tear on the
He
shirt.
just didn't duck going through a doorway, that's all that was
No, I
about.
think he's got a double or triple patches on his knees. And then along the left side here, we've got a huge safety pin that's holding part of that shirt
I
together.
didn't notice that till you saw
But
that.
still, look at his face.
But look-
His
look
face
at
is
the-
just.
Look at the veins in the arms, look at the strength
Yes.
in the arms.
True
You know?
tribute to
Yes,
the
you can
working
just
man.
see that.
Been down all these roads, done that. Oh, that's great. I just love it.
This is out at the Altona Dam,
Oh,
where
it is?
this picture's taken. Yes.
And that gentleman, his name is Frank Hart, working at the Altona Dam in 1911. Just super.
Great stuff. This is, as you said, this is just a kind of a potpourri in here, isn't it?
Absolutely. This room we wanted to just have like a gallery of pictures, some of the really nice shots of people working, and just for your enjoyment. We have a little film that you probably hear in the background, and there's not a whole lot of narration. It's just a relaxing time back in the 1900s with the miners. And we've got some really great shots of them taking off down, going off to work. This is looking right down 191 at the farm.
Oh,
And
my goodness.
And you can see teams of mules leading wagons out to the fields, we assume, with Heart's Delight in the background. Here's your farm office, and here's the big horse barn that we are right on the side of, with your steel tower in the background and the house tower. So it's a great shot of the farm.
Takes classic photographs all the way. And look at this sleigh. This guy's bundled up, isn't he?
Oh, yes. Plenty of furs there to keep him warm. Nice mustache to keep his lips from freezing. He's all set.
I understand that even when they were busing the children to school on the buses, that they would supply them with those big buffalo furs.
They did
that
exactly the
would-
same, and as Russ Trombley told us a few minutes ago off camera, they used to put straw on the floor. The school bus was a large wagon with, well, they transported the kids, and they cover the floor with straw so the feet would stay a little warmer.
No
He
kidding.
looked at me and smiled and said, "It didn't work. It was cold." But he said, "Yeah, miners had a lot of blankets. We could cover up with buffalo."
Did he say that?
The late Sid Spiegel, who was, anybody who's been around here for a while knows, was an icon in the radio business for a long time, used to tell me about how they ferried passengers across Lake Champlain in the wintertime on horse-drawn taxis, they call them.
Right.
And you know what the wind
Yes.
she blow on Lake
Yes.
Champlain, and then she blow some more.
Mm-hmm.
They covered up with stacks and stacks of buffalo robes.
Oh.
It's a miracle they could find them when they got to the other side. There's somebody's prize bull, huh?
Yeah, that's a Holstein bull, probably one of the breeding bulls that was on the farm at the time. Really, it's just a bunch of pictures. We have them working in the fields, cutting corn. This is a great shot of a
Team of 6.
Yeah, a team of 6, and they're all Percheron horses. The wagon that they're pulling, we're not sure. It kind of looks like land tile the way it is there, so that would have been fairly heavy. And
Or-
that's probably what that is.
Or it could have been asbestos to cover the pipes with. You know, they had asbestos rolls
It's possible.
that would open up and go around your pipes, which of course would be so forbidden today that it wouldn't be funny,
Right.
but I've seen hundreds of miles of those
That's-
in many of the old
that's-
buildings. But it
Quite-
doesn't seem likely with a team,
of
a six team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Look at this.
This is some of the refrigeration equipment that was inside the ice machine building, and that's right next to the ice machine building was located. There was a meat packing building, so this was producing refrigeration to keep that building cold. And this is some of the early equipment that was on the farm at the time.
Generators. Unbelievable. Massive. And, you know, like I said, the modern technology in the year 1903, you know,
Exactly.
or whatever,
That had
1905.
that had to come around probably after they got tired of cutting ice blocks off the reservoir for a while. And then we're looking at the steel tower in this view. Again, this tower was quite tall and was for fire protection. We're told that this is a Pierce arrow on this end view. I don't know if you're familiar with cars, but we're told
It certainly
that
looks like a Pierce arrow. The three P's were the Packard, the Pierce arrow, and the Peerless.
Okay.
And the Packard lasted longer than the others, but the Pierce arrow, of course, was a classic automobile of its time.
And we don't have a name for this guy, the chauffeur for the miners, but we're hoping maybe in the rounds when people are coming through, they might be able to put some names to some
Once
of these
again,
faces.
we don't mind getting information from
No,
anybody
we
who
don't.
might be
That's
viewing
right.
this program.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So
That's cool. That's cool.
again, all the woodwork in the front display for our video is done by the same person who built the frames for it's Hal
Moore.
Hal Moore. So
Really great.
He did a really nice job in here as well.
Tasteful and wonderful. Boy, is that a hard way to load hay.
Well, they didn't have much of a choice back then, but they certainly were working very hard. And you can see one of the windmills in the background. That was Richardson Spring windmill that's working there. And then to keep the crops from getting wet, whether it be at night or from the dew or maybe from the rain, they had a tarp, as you can see in the background, that went over the top of each pile, and they kept the hay dry that way.
Great idea. Why not? Oh, this is
And again, we're just bringing in more crops on this view. So this was
famous
just
McCormick harvesters.
absolutely, absolutely pulled by 3 horses, which is, I find kind of interesting. You don't usually see 3 horses abroad like that.
Look at the straw hats.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the greatest. Looks like it's
That's-
been in the field more than 2 days, too, doesn't it?
I think so.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's a wonderful room. Didn't we miss something in the? We missed a couple of things out here that I wanted to take a look at before we leave, because I wanted to talk about those. I wanted to show you the school bus that Russ Trombley went to school on, and there it is, right there, that very same school bus. And he said once he moved to another school, they graduated to a real motorized school bus. And this is the actual photograph of the one that he rode to school in. So you talk about creating memories for somebody who walks
Oh,
in the
yes.
door. Isn't that
Yes.
so cool? We talk about the school, underground tunnels, and what a tremendous place. And of course, Physicians Hospital, which we've talked about on and on and on. And Calvin and I did a delicious tour into the bowels of the building. And
Oh, did you?
Way up above where anybody has seen for a long, long time. And it was just
Yes.
a tremendous place, which has now evolved into Champlain Valley Physicians Hospital.
One of the things that we did recently was, as we talk about these 2 contributions to the community, nowadays, if you said someone spent $2 million to build the school or $4 million to build the hospital, it doesn't sound like what it used to sound like. So we had that translated into today's terms. The $2 million gift to build the school in 1915 would be equal to $36 million today, a gift of that size. And the Physicians Hospital in 1925, the gift of $4 million, would be equivalent to a $42 million gift today. Not that you would be able to build it with modern technology for those sort of prices, but just to give you an idea of what he was really giving to the community. Because when we look at $1 million nowadays, although I'd love to have $1 million, it doesn't sound like so much anymore because people talk in those terms all the time.
And I think it's significant, Steve, to talk about some of the smaller things that the miners did for people in the community, not just these major multi-million-dollar contributions. But I mean, we've heard of philanthropy, but the miners believed in helping those who were less fortunate. And if they heard of some needy group or a family that needed help at Christmas time especially, there would be gifts for them. And they would do personal things for people that you would never expect them to do. And that's part of this legacy of love that came from this family.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories are out there, and I really need to have the people here to tell them. But some of the ones I've heard of stories where people were sick in the rural areas, and they had no way of getting to a doctor, and they would provide the means for getting a doctor either out to them or them to a doctor. So they would do things like that, and I've heard of homes that burnt.
Mm-hmm.
People were,
Sure.
hardships in families, and the miners would contribute money to build their home back, and so there's and those stories do go on and on and on from
But
different
they're
people.
heartwarming.
They
Since we're
actually
on
are.
the Hearts
They
Delight
actually
Farm, they are heartwarming.
In
They
fact,
actually
this
are.
morning someone was mentioning to me the fact that they didn't call it Minor Central School, they didn't call it Minor Physicians Hospital. They didn't try to build some edifice in their own honor. They gave it and named it for the community, and it wasn't something to be some lasting tribute to their name. So I think that stands for something too, in their own quiet way.
It was lasting, and it was a tribute, and I think we proved that here today. There's another sign from the property behind us.
Yep, that's an old sign that was still in storage, and so we brought that out, and we just kind of think it dates our little exhibit with some of the old artifacts that are in here. This little section that you're in now, we still like to talk about the legacy that lives on, and that's Miner Institute. And that's who we are today, what we do today. It's still teaching and demonstration and research is still happening on the premises. And again, I can't stress the vision part enough. We're still living William H. Miner's vision, and this is exactly what he wanted to do. So we're still a part of it and very proud of it, actually. So it does just continue.
I think they'll both be proud of both of you for how well you've been conducting this tour today.
Well, the Institute itself, which has that very long name, the William H. Miner Agricultural Research Institute, was formed in 1951, but it was a result of Mr. Miner's final wishes placed in his will that he would have built a college and farm that demonstrated and educated principles of agriculture. So that's where we fit into the scheme of things, and it's actually bringing down his wishes right down through the years, because we do today still have at the Institute Dairy Day, Corn Congress, we have hoof trimming clinics for horses, Equiday. We have farm days for fifth graders, which is, 800 to 1,000 kids
Every
coming
year.
here in June for 3 or 4 days. We have groups coming in to learn about farming, because so many people live in a rural area and still know nothing about agriculture. Really are in the dark about where the radish comes from, or how a cucumber
Where
grows.
does milk
or
come from?
And
The
we're not-
store,
where the milk
right?
comes
From the store, as you
Absolutely.
ask a city kid,
Right.
from the Grand Union.
Right.
And we aren't just regional anymore. Miner Institute isn't just in this area. We're national. nationally known for what we do now, and we're also globally known for what we do now. We're working in Japan and some other countries that are very aware of what we do, and we're reaching out to people all over the world now with our research and some of the findings that we're doing. So it's real important that people realize that we're not just regional, and we do reach out and go to a lot of different areas.
And as soon as we tell everybody in the rest of the globe that Steve Facette does the narration for the when they walk in the building, talk about
Hollywood.
globally, we won't be able to talk to him next week. It's absolutely wonderful, and we're going to wrap up our program at Hearts Delight Farm in just a few minutes. I notice on a lot of the displays you have given credit where credit is due for the people who've made donations, and I notice a gift of Rod and Dodie Giltz, our dear friends, so it's nice to
Yes.
give them a little thanks and support too, huh?
It sure is. There were a couple of benefactors. One was Dr. and Mrs. Burke, who gave us the wonderful birdhouse that was back on the other side. And then Rod Giltz is also on our board at Minor Institute. And we have a very special book here, which was produced in 1909 by Mr. Minor, and it's a very proud portrayal of his farm, the animals, the buildings, beautiful sayings, information a little bit about the farm, but mostly a view book, which he would give to friends, to business acquaintances, just to let them know what was happening here on the farm. What we decided was, because we had several copies, that we could take a very good copy and we could sacrifice that. That's not always a popular thing with preservation,
yeah.
but we decided that it would be important for the general public to be able to see what one of these books looked like. We went to Sean. Sean took our book to Montreal, where it was, each page, excuse me, was laminated. The book was stitched back together by hand by craftsmen up there. And people have a chance to leaf through this book, which is, I think, about 150 some odd pages, and just get an idea of what this wonderful gift was that the miners would give out to their friends. These items are now one of those eBay items that you see for several $100s for one in poor condition. So we're very proud, and we're very pleased that Rod and Dodie Giltz gave us this gift so that we were able to show this to the public that comes through.
Is there anything in the world that doesn't show up on eBay? I heard some guys tried to sell his whole family on eBay last week, so you never know what's going to happen. You went and got some treasures while Linda and I were talking. What did you bring us?
Well, we just wanted to show you the negatives that we found.
Oh, yes.
The very first, for folks that aren't familiar with a glass plate negative, this is what we're working with, and a glass plate negative is, I don't know, we said about 8 by 10, but so we're working with
yes.
negatives like this. But the very first trunk of negatives that I opened up contained 42 books like this. And they're all labeled. This one says Panoramic Views Volume 2. And as you open it up, there's a ledger. So the sleeve number 5 is going to tell you exactly what it is. And so all the negatives were inside of these books. And every negative is labeled, dated, and archived. So that's how we were able to
Did you feel like
put together.
Aladdin rubbing the lamp when you got into this?
Just about.
Like a little kid
Just about.
at a toy
Just about.
store?
So, it was, yeah, I mean, the information was there. It just was allow you to piece together the history and the roots that this place, where it came from.
Thank God, not only for William H. Minor and Alice T. Minor, but thank goodness that they had the foresight to preserve some of these things so that 100 years later we'd be talking about them in August 2003. You opened tremendous doors for us. We don't have time in this episode to walk all the wonderful paths and see those things that you have described. But I guess it wouldn't be quite fair to tell everything and to show everything, so we're inviting guests to come here and take a look for themselves, to touch these old books, to look at these old displays on the walls, to see what a tasteful and marvelous job you people have been doing for posterity, not only for today's school kids, but for old people like me and Russ Trombley. Never mind Calvin, he's just a young squirt around here. But I want to personally thank you both for allowing us to come here today and sharing this tremendous experience.
Well, we thank you very much, and I just would like to tell people out there that Wayside Walk is available all the time, so they'd be able to go out anytime, spring, summer, fall, and enjoy that and enjoy the gardens, even if this building does not happen to be available at the time. The story's out there, it's just not the detail that there is in here.
Self-guided tours, have you heard that
That's
phrase
right.
before? Thanks, Linda. Steve, thanks so much. We really appreciate this walkthrough.
Thank you very much for coming. I think people are going to enjoy this, and we welcome everyone here.
I'm going to tell everybody I know. By God, I think I already have. Who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.